The chill of late October clung to Ember like a second skin, seeping through her worn leather jacket despite the brisk pace she set. Leaves, skeletal fingers of forgotten autumns, scuttled across the cracked pavement of the old town road. Tonight was Halloween, a night of forced festivity and flimsy costumes, but for Ember, it was just another Tuesday. A night she'd rather spend curled up with a dusty textbook than entertaining the frivolous whims of her friends. Which brought her to the imposing, wrought iron gates of Blackwood Manor. "You're actually going through with this?" Chloe's voice, high-pitched with nervous excitement, crackled through Ember's earpiece. "I can't believe you agreed." "A bet's a bet," Ember muttered, adjusting the small headlamp strapped to her forehead. The beam cut a weak swathe through the gloom, illuminating the rusted lock on the gate, long since broken. The air here was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth, decay, and something else. Something metallic and cold. Or maybe that was just her imagination, already playing tricks. Blackwood Manor. The name alone was enough to send shivers down the spines of the town's more superstitious inhabitants. Built in the late 17th century, it was a sprawling, Gothic monument to tragedy and whispered scandal. The current owner, an absentee eccentric, allowed it to rot, feeding the legends that clung to its ivy-choked walls like desperate ghosts. Legend had it that Silas Blackwood, the manor's original lord, had been executed on the grounds for witchcraft and treason over 3 centuries ago. His spirit, they said, still roamed the desolate halls, a tormented echo of a dark past. Ember, however, was a firm believer in logic and cold, hard facts. Ghosts were simply lingering energies, tricks of the mind, or drafts in old houses. This whole dare, spend Halloween night alone in Blackwood Manor and document her findings, was merely an opportunity to prove her friends wrong and earn a significant sum of cash she desperately needed for her next semester's tuition. Remember, livestream is mandatory for proof. Liam's voice chirped in, pulling her from her thoughts. "And if you find anything actually spooky, capture it." "Right, because ghosts love a good selfie," Ember retorted, pushing open the creaking gate. The hinges screamed in protest, a sound like a tortured soul, causing Chloe to yelp in her ear. She started up the long, winding drive, the overgrown path reclaiming itself bit by bit. The manor loomed in the distance, a colossal silhouette against the bruised purple sky. Its windows were like empty, staring eyes, reflecting the last dying embers of twilight. She activated the live stream on her phone, attaching it to a small gimbal she'd brought. "All right, for all you thrill seekers, I'm officially entering the haunted grounds of Blackwood Manor. Expect a lot of dust." The manor's front door was a magnificent, imposing slab of oak studded with tarnished brass. The lock, surprisingly, was intact, but years of exposure had weakened the wood around it. A well-placed kick, followed by a hefty shove, forced it open with a groan that seemed to reverberate through the very earth. The inside was exactly as she'd imagined, a tomb. The air was frigid and utterly stagnant, laden with the scent of mildew, decaying velvet, and something else. Something subtly sweet and cloying, like dried blood and roses. Dust motes danced in the weak beam of her headlamp, making the silence feel even heavier. Cobwebs draped every surface, shimmering like forgotten shrouds. "First impression?" Chloe asked, trying to sound brave. "Needs a good airing out," Ember said, her voice sounding oddly small in the cavernous foyer. Her own heart gave an unexpected thump, a traitorous beat that had nothing to do with adrenaline and everything to do with the unnerving atmosphere. The grand staircase, a spiral of dark polished wood, dominated the foyer, leading up into impenetrable darkness. Portraits, their subjects' faces obscured by grime and time, stared down from the walls. Ember felt a prickle on the back of her neck, a sensation she immediately dismissed as the cold. She started her methodical survey, camera panning slowly. Checking the ground floor first. Kitchen to the left, dining room to the right, parlors further in. Nothing but standard dereliction. No specters yet, guys. She moved into what must have been the main parlor. The furniture, still mostly intact under its dust covers, hinted at a lavish past. A grand piano, its keys yellowed and chipped, sat in one corner. She ran a gloved finger over the keys, but no sound came forth. The stillness was absolute. Then she heard it. A whisper. Faint, ethereal, like silk rustling in a breeze that wasn't there. It came from deeper within the manor, from the shadowy corridors leading towards the back. "Did you hear that?" Chloe's voice was sharp with fear. Ember paused, straining her ears. "Hear what?" "Just the wind, probably." This place has more drafts than a politician. She tried to sound confident, but her skin crawled. The whisper wasn't the wind. It was too soft, too close to a human voice. She felt a sudden drop in temperature, so profound it stole her breath. Her headlamp flickered, then died, plunging her into absolute darkness. "Guys?" "My lamp just went out," she said into the mic, her voice betraying a hint of panic. "Ember? What's going on?" Liam's voice was frantic. Before she could answer, a hand, cold as grave dust, brushed against her arm. It wasn't a playful tap. It was a caress, chilling her to the bone, sending a jolt of primal terror through her. And then a breath, impossibly cold, ghosted across her ear. "Welcome home, little sparrow." Ember froze, every nerve ending screaming. The earpiece had gone silent, the faint static replaced by a ringing in her own ears. The hand, impossibly cold and yet undeniably there, lingered on her arm, its touch not entirely menacing, but deeply unsettling. It was a possessive caress, an ancient claim. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to rationalize it away. A draft, a spider web, a hallucination brought on by nerves and the genuinely creepy atmosphere. But the voice had been so clear, so close, echoing in her mind rather than her ears. "Hello?" she managed to croak, her voice barely a whisper. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, absolute silence. Her headlamp remained stubbornly dark. She fumbled for her phone, its screen the only source of light, and frantically tried to turn on its flashlight. As the phone's beam flickered to life, casting a narrow cone of weak light, Ember whipped around. There was nothing there, just dust-shrouded furniture and the looming shadows of the parlor. Yet the air still crackled with an unseen presence, heavy and expectant. The cold lingered on her arm, a phantom touch that made her shiver. "Ember, are you there?" "What was that sound?" Chloe's panicked voice exploded back into her earpiece, making her jump. I think I'm fine," Ember stammered, trying to regain her composure. "My headlamp died. I thought I felt something, but it was probably just a draft." Even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. The chill, the whisper, the caress, they hadn't been a draft. "Okay, get out of there," Liam demanded. "This isn't worth it. The bet's off." "No," Ember said, a strange stubbornness blooming in her chest. Part of it was defiance against her own fear. Part of it was the stubborn need to prove her scientific skepticism. And part of it was a primal curiosity she couldn't ignore. "I'm not leaving yet. My camera's still recording, so you'll see if anything interesting happens." She checked her phone. The live stream was indeed still active, though the last few minutes would have been pitch black. The battery indicator, however, was flashing red. "Great," she muttered. "My phone's almost dead." She had been so focused on her headlamp she hadn't noticed. She knew she should leave. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to flee. But that whisper, "Welcome home, little sparrow." It was unsettling, yet it had held a strange, melodic quality. Taking a deep breath, Ember forced herself to be methodical. Her phone's light was dim and dying. She needed to find an exit, or at least a less unsettling place. She slowly turned, casting the phone's fading light around the room. Her gaze landed on a large, ornate portrait hanging above the mantelpiece. It was covered in more grime than the others, almost completely obscured. Something compelled her to approach it. As she drew closer, the phone in her hand flickered violently, then died, plunging her into darkness once more. She gasped, her breath catching. The air grew impossibly cold again, and the subtle scent of old roses intensified, mixing with that metallic tang. Then slowly, eerily, a faint phosphorescent glow began to emanate from the portrait. The grime seemed to recede, peeling back like a veil, revealing the face within. It was a man. His features were aristocratic, sharply chiseled, with high cheekbones and a strong jawline. His hair, dark and long, framed a face that was both handsome and haunting, but it was his eyes that truly captivated her. They were dark, piercing, and held an ancient sorrow, a profound weariness that seemed to span centuries. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on his lips, and as the glow brightened, his eyes, those deep dark pools, moved. They focused directly on Ember, pinning her in place. The faint smirk widened, becoming a genuine, if ghostly, smile. "So you finally came." A voice, rich and deep, resonated not in her ears but directly in her mind, wrapping around her consciousness like a silken thread. "I have been waiting." Ember stumbled backward, falling heavily onto a dusty, unseen ottoman. This was no trick of the light, no draft. This was real. And the ghost, the very spirit of Silas Blackwood, was staring at her. Her heart pounded, not just with fear, but with something else, a strange, undeniable fascination. He was terrifying, yet utterly captivating. Who are you?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer. "Silas," the voice in her mind replied, the name a caress. "Silas Blackwood, and you, little sparrow, are mine." The revelation was a hammer blow to Ember's carefully constructed world of logic and reason. A ghost. A real sentient ghost, speaking directly into her mind from a painting. Every fiber of her scientific skepticism screamed for denial, but the evidence was overwhelming and terrifyingly real. "Yours?" Ember choked out, pushing herself back from the ottoman, scrambling to her feet. The portrait of Silas glowed with an internal, ethereal light, his dark eyes fixed on her. The phantom cold enveloped her, an invisible cloak. "I'm not anyone's. I don't even know you." A soft, melancholic laugh echoed in her mind. "But you do, little sparrow. You feel it, do you not? The pull, the connection that brought you here tonight on this most auspicious of nights." Ember felt a prickle, not of fear, but of an odd recognition. When she had touched the gate, when she had pushed open the door, there had been a strange sense of belonging, a resonance. She had dismissed it as nerves, but now, "I'm leaving," she declared, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. She turned, desperate to find the door, to escape the oppressive presence of the manor and its spectral master. But as she took a step, a force, unseen but utterly unyielding, blocked her path. She ran into what felt like a solid wall of ice, recoiling with a gasp. "Let me go!" "No," Silas's voice in her mind was firmer now, a low thrum that vibrated through her very bones. "You came here by your own will, by my invitation. You will not leave until our business is concluded." "Business?" Ember scoffed, trying to sound brave, though her voice trembled. What business could a living woman possibly have with a centuries-dead ghost? "Freedom," Silas replied, his spectral form seeming to shimmer within the portrait. "You hold the key to mine, little sparrow, just as I, perhaps, hold the key to other things for you." His words were enigmatic, tantalizing, and deeply unnerving. Ember found herself staring back at the portrait, her fear slowly intertwining with an almost morbid fascination. His eyes, though dark, held a profound intelligence, a hunger that seemed to reach across the centuries. "What are you talking about?" "I don't have any key. I'm just a student." "You are more than you know," Silas's voice soothed, a dangerous lullaby. "Your bloodline, your very essence, resonates with the ancient magic that binds me. It has called you to me, just as my plight has called out for release." Ember felt a strange tingling in her veins, a sensation that she had often attributed to exhaustion or caffeine but now felt distinctly magical. She was vaguely aware of her phone, somewhere on the dusty floor, its live stream undoubtedly dead, its battery depleted. Her friends would be frantic by now. How can I free you?" she asked, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Her curiosity, a scholar's insatiable need to understand, was battling with her instinct for self-preservation. A sigh, like the rustling of ancient leaves, emanated from the portrait. "It is a complex ritual, one lost to time and fear, but it requires the essence of one untainted, one who can touch the veil between worlds, one like you." As he spoke, the cold presence shifted. It was no longer a chilling wall, but a soft, enveloping embrace. Ember felt a gentle pressure on her waist, as if an arm had wrapped around her. A spectral hand, cool but not freezing, lifted, a strand of hair from her shoulder tucking it behind her ear. The touch lingered, sending a wave of goosebumps down her arms. It was intimate, possessive, and utterly breathtaking. Her breath hitched. She could feel his presence, intensely, undeniably. He was close, closer than any living person. The scent of old roses and that metallic tang intensified, wrapping around her. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I want to walk among the living again." Silas's voice resonated in her mind, laced with centuries of longing. "I want to feel the sun on my skin, the earth beneath my feet. And I want you to be there by my side when I do." His spectral kiss, cold as winter, brushed against her temple, sending a shiver that was both frightful and strangely exhilarating through her. It was a promise, a claim, and a chilling invitation. She was no longer just in a haunted house. She was in the grasp of a powerful ancient spirit, and she was already deeply, irrevocably entangled. Days blurred into an eerie, timeless existence within the confines of Blackwood Manor. Ember never truly left. Or rather, Silas wouldn't allow her to. Every attempt to approach the front door, to even peek through a dust-caked window, was met with an invisible, unyielding barrier. Her phone had long since died, its signal lost, leaving her utterly isolated from the outside world. Her friends, she knew, would be frantically searching, alerting authorities. But she was in a different realm now, a prisoner to a man who was no longer quite a man. Silas was her constant companion, a pervasive presence she could feel and hear, but rarely see beyond the portrait. His voice, a melodic baritone in her mind, filled the silence of the manor. He walked through walls, drifted through closed doors, and occasionally, she would feel his cold touch, a caress on her cheek, a hand resting on her shoulder, a presence beside her as she tried to eat the dwindling supply of granola bars she'd brought. He was a storyteller, weaving tales of his life, his unjust execution for witchcraft and treason, and the ancient magic that ran through his family line, a magic tied to the earth, to the turning of the seasons, and to the very fabric of life and death. He spoke of the curse laid upon him by his accusers, binding him to the manor, his spirit unable to move on, kept in a state of torment and longing. They feared what they didn't understand. Silas's voice resonated in her mind one evening, as Ember sat huddled in a musty armchair listening. She had grown accustomed to his presence, her initial terror slowly morphing into a strange, unsettling familiarity. They called it black magic, but it was merely the deep connection my family had to the old ways, to the spirit of the land. Ember, ever the scholar, found herself captivated despite her predicament. "But why me, Silas? Why do I hold the key?" A sigh, like wind chimes in a desolate garden, whispered through the room. "Your bloodline, little sparrow. It is rare, almost forgotten now. Your ancestors were the keepers of the old balance, the ones who understood the natural flow of magic, who could commune with spirits without falling prey to them. A binding ritual, a true one, requires a link, a willing vessel, untainted by the fear and ignorance that cursed me." He revealed fragments of the ritual, ancient words and symbols that flickered in her mind's eye. It spoke of a merging, a giving of energy, a profound connection between the living and the dead. It sounded dangerous, irreversible, and yet a strange pull, a sense of destiny, tugged at Ember. One afternoon, as she explored the dusty library, a room Silas seemed to especially favor, she found herself drawn to a specific section. Her fingers, guided by an unseen force, brushed across the spines of ancient, leather-bound tomes, stopping on one with a faded, embossed sigil she somehow recognized from the whispers of Silas's explanations. It was a family grimoire belonging to the Blackwoods. As she opened it, a faint golden light emanated from the pages. The script was archaic, but strangely she could understand it. It detailed the Blackwood family's lineage, their connection to the land's magic, and then, stark and chilling, the curse laid upon Silas. It also spoke of the ritual of release. It wasn't just a release for Silas, it was a binding. A permanent tethering of two souls. The ritual would merge his spectral essence with her living one, allowing him to regain a physical form, but forever intertwining their fates. She would become his anchor, his living connection to the world, and he, her protector, her shadow, her eternal companion. The book called it The Ghost's Kiss, a promise of life for the dead, sealed by an unbreakable vow. As she read the chilling words, her breath hitched. This was far more than simply freeing a ghost. This was sacrificing a part of herself, binding herself to a man from another century, a powerful, possessive spirit. "You found it," Silas's voice resonated in her mind, soft and triumphant. He was there, closer than ever, his spectral presence swirling around her like a cold mist. "Now you understand. Our destinies are not separate, little sparrow. They are woven together, a tapestry centuries in the making." She looked up, not at the portrait, but instinctively towards the empty space beside her. The air shimmered, and for a fleeting moment she saw him. Not as a painting, but as a translucent, shimmering form, his dark eyes filled with an intensity that stole her breath. He was impossibly handsome, yet utterly terrifying in his spectral beauty. He reached out, his hand passing through the pages of the grimoire, through her own hand, and settled on her cheek. The cold was profound, yet it held a strange, magnetic warmth. "You are mine, Ember," he whispered, his voice resonating deep within her soul. "You always were. And soon we will be one. Soon I will live again. And you? You will be the heart of my new life." His gaze held hers, an unbreakable tether. The decision was no longer hers to make. It had been made for her centuries ago, by fate, by blood, and by a ghost's dark, obsessive love. The Halloween night dare had spiraled into something ancient and unavoidable, and Ember, the skeptic, was now truly ensnared by the ghost's kiss. Days bled into weeks within Blackwood Manor, each one deepening the strange, unbreakable bond between Ember and Silas. The initial terror Ember felt had been slowly, irrevocably replaced by an unnerving acceptance, then a consuming fascination. Silas was a paradox, a being of profound cold and yet an almost searing emotional intensity. His presence, once chilling, had become a constant, enveloping companion. He was her only confidant, her only company, and slowly, dangerously, he was becoming her entire world. He communicated not just through the mind voice, but through subtle shifts in the manor's atmosphere. A sudden warmth in a frigid room meant his approval. A violent gust of wind through a broken pane signaled his displeasure. He led her through the manor's forgotten passages, revealing hidden rooms, secret compartments, and caches of ancient relics. Tools, he explained, that would be necessary for the ritual of release. Ember, the practical scholar, found herself adapting with shocking speed. She meticulously studied the Blackwood grimoire, deciphering its archaic script and intricate diagrams. The ritual was indeed a soul-binding, a true ghost's kiss, promising Silas physical form while irrevocably tethering Ember to his very essence. It was a terrifying prospect, the complete loss of her individual autonomy, but a strange, dark current pulled her towards it. She was no longer just a participant. She was drawn into the depths of his long-held torment, his centuries of loneliness. The autumnal equinox is approaching. Silas's voice resonated in her mind one evening, as she copied an intricate diagram from the grimoire. The veil between worlds will be at its thinnest. It is the most auspicious time for the ritual. Ember felt a jolt of apprehension. That's only a few days away. Are we truly ready for this, Silas? Ready? A low melodic laugh, a sound that stirred something primal within her, echoed in her mind. Little sparrow, I have been ready for 350 years. You, however, must be certain. There is no turning back once the blood moon rises. Her hand, stained with ink, hovered over the parchment. Blood moon. The term sent a shiver down her spine. The ritual required more than just symbols and incantations. It demanded a sacrifice, a true melding. She would give him a body, but she would become the constant echo within his. She would be his living shadow, his conscience, his light. What will happen to me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper, not into the empty air, but directly to him, through their growing connection. His presence swirled around her, a cold embrace. You will not die, little sparrow. You will merge. Your consciousness will be intertwined with mine. You will see through my eyes, hear through my ears, feel what I feel. You will be forever a part of me, and I, a part of you. It was the ultimate loss of self, yet in his words, Ember found a strange, dangerous allure. She had always felt a little lost, a little disconnected from the world. Perhaps this merging was her true purpose. The dark, possessive love Silas offered was not gentle, but it was absolute. Their conversation was abruptly cut short by a distant thud, a dull impact from the outside. Ember instinctively froze. The manor, usually an echoing silence, suddenly felt alive with new, invasive sounds. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, on the gravel drive. A dog barking in the distance. Silas's presence around her shifted, growing taut, wary. "Intruders," he hissed, his mind voice sharp with ancient suspicion. "They come for me. They come for you." Ember's heart leaped into her throat. The outside world had finally breached their isolated haven. "My friends," she whispered. "They must have sent someone to look for me." "They are not friends," Silas snarled, his presence hardening into a protective, unyielding shield around her. "They are the tools of the accusers, the descendants of those who bound me. They seek to destroy us both." He manifested faintly beside her, his translucent form shimmering, his dark eyes blazing with an ancient fury. He looked less like a portrait now and more like a barely there vision, a shadow gaining substance. He reached out, his hand passing through hers but conveying an urgent, commanding grip. "We must conceal the grimoire," he ordered, his voice echoing in her mind. "And we must prepare. The ritual cannot be interrupted, not now. Not when we are so close." The outside world, with its laws and its disbelief, was breaking down their door. But inside Blackwood Manor, a power centuries in the making was about to rise. The intrusion was swift and decisive. The heavy oak front door, which Ember had struggled to open weeks ago, splintered inwards with a single brutal kick. A team of grim-faced men and women, clad in practical tactical gear and armed with an array of strange devices, swarmed into the foyer. Leading them was a tall, severe woman with sharp features and even sharper eyes, Detective Amelia Vance. And just behind her, their faces etched with frantic worry, were Chloe and Liam. "Ember." "Oh my God, Ember, you're alive." Chloe screamed, her voice choked with relief as she spotted Ember in the shadowy library doorway. Ember stood frozen, her heart torn. Her friends. They had come for her, but Silas's presence beside her was a cold, hard wall, radiating suspicion and a deep, ancestral hatred. "Do not trust them, little sparrow," Silas's mind voice warned, a low, dangerous rumble. "They carry instruments of binding, tools of my tormentors." Indeed, the devices the tactical team carried hummed with a low frequency, their energy indicators glowing faintly. Ember recognized some of the archaic symbols etched onto them from the grimoire. Ancient wards, designed to disrupt and contain spirits. Detective Vance, her gaze sharp and intelligent, swept over Ember, then around the ominous library. "Ember Miller, you're safe. We've been looking for you for weeks. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Ember said, her voice sounding unnaturally flat even to her own ears. Her eyes darted between her friends and the determined, dangerous faces of the agents. "What are you doing here?" "We received a distress signal from your friends," Vance explained, gesturing to Chloe and Liam, who were now being held back by a few agents. "They reported you missing after entering this manor on a dare. And after running some background, we believe you may be in danger from a resident." Her eyes, cold and assessing, settled on the portrait of Silas Blackwood. It remained a grimy, ordinary painting to the living, but Ember felt Silas's furious energy spike. "They know," Silas hissed in her mind, his presence tightening around her. "They suspect. They fear what they cannot control." "There's nothing here," Ember insisted, trying to sound convincing. "Just an old house. I got stuck. My phone died. We're detecting unusual energy signatures throughout the manor," Vance countered, holding up a sleek device that hummed louder as she moved it. "Strongest right here. Specifically around that painting." Panic, cold and visceral, began to set in. They weren't just here to rescue her. They were here to contain Silas. And if they contained Silas, the ritual would be impossible. Her destiny, her connection would be severed. "You need to leave," Ember said, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "There's nothing to find." Suddenly, the air in the library crackled. Books flew from shelves, furniture scraped across the floor, and a chilling wind howled through the room, though all windows were shut. Ember felt Silas's raw power, unfiltered, unleashed in furious defense. The agents cried out, scrambling for cover. Chloe and Liam screamed, their faces pale with terror. "He's here!" Vance shouted, drawing a strange silver-etched pistol. "He's making his presence known." She aimed the weapon directly at the portrait. "No!" Ember screamed, throwing herself forward. But it was too late. Vance fired. A bolt of shimmering silver light erupted from the pistol, striking the portrait with a blinding flash. The painting exploded. Splinters of wood and canvas flew outwards, scorching the wall. A wave of pure, agonizing cold slammed into Ember, knocking her backward. She landed hard, pain blossoming in her head. When she looked up, the wall was charred, the portrait utterly destroyed. And then she saw him. Silas. He was there, fully visible, shimmering with a furious, ethereal light. He was no longer translucent. He was a cohesive form, dark hair falling around a face twisted with primal rage. His dark eyes, now glowing with a malevolent crimson, were fixed on Vance. He was terrifyingly beautiful, a being of pure vengeance. "You trespassers." Silas's voice, now a resonant growl that shook the very foundations of the manor, echoed through the library, physically assaulting their ears. "You broke your own laws. You broke my sanctuary." He raised a spectral hand and the very air warped. The lights flickered, plunged into darkness, then exploded into blinding flashes. Objects in the room began to levitate, spinning wildly before being hurled with impossible force at the agents. Chaos erupted. Ember watched, horrified and mesmerized. This was the true Silas unleashed. This was the power she was about to bind herself to. It was magnificent and terrifying. Amidst the pandemonium, Silas's eyes found hers. The crimson glow softened, just for a moment, to a deep, possessive black. "The ritual, little sparrow," his mind voice resonated, desperate now. "We must complete it, now." Chaos reigned in the library. Tables overturned, bookshelves collapsed, and ancient artifacts shattered against the stone walls. The agents, trained for human threats, found themselves battling an unseen elemental force. Their anti-spectral devices hummed frantically, useless against the raw, unfiltered fury of Silas Blackwood. Ember, still reeling from the impact of the blast, watched Silas with a mixture of awe and trepidation. He was magnificent, a whirlwind of spectral energy, his form shimmering between solid and ethereal. He moved with an inhuman grace, dodging the frantic energy blasts from the agent's pistols, his own power manifesting as gusts of freezing wind, slamming doors, and a pervasive, mind-numbing dread that gripped every living person in the room. Chloe and Liam huddled together, terrified, calling her name. But Ember could only hear Silas. "The ritual, Ember." "We must reach the ritual chamber." His mind voice was a desperate plea, cutting through the din. She knew what she had to do. This was no longer a question of escaping. This was a question of fulfilling their intertwined destiny. Silas needed her. Their souls were already reaching for each other across the chasm of life and death. Ignoring the shouts of her friends and the frantic activity of the agents, Ember stumbled to her feet. She grabbed the Blackwood grimoire, which had miraculously remained intact, and headed towards the hidden passage Silas had shown her. Detective Vance, surprisingly resilient, saw her movement. "Ember, stop! He's manipulating you. He's a monster." She aimed her pistol, not at Silas, but at Ember. "She is mine," Silas roared, a wave of cold dread emanating from him that sent the closest agents recoiling. He manifested directly in front of Vance, his spectral hand closing around her throat. She gasped, dropping her weapon, her face turning ashen. "No, Silas!" Ember screamed, her voice cutting through the ghostly howl. "Don't kill them! They don't understand." Silas paused, his eyes still burning crimson, but a flicker of his ancient sorrow crossed his face. He looked at Ember, and the fury in his eyes slowly, begrudgingly receded. He released Vance, who collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. "This is not their fight," Ember pleaded, knowing she was begging for her friends' lives. "This is our fight. And we must finish it." Silas stared at her, then back at the terrified agents. A moment of chilling silence descended. Then, with a furious snarl, he unleashed a wave of raw energy that wasn't destructive, but incapacitating. It slammed into the agents, sending them sprawling, their bodies convulsing, unconscious. He had knocked them out, not killed them. He had listened to her. "Run, Ember!" Liam screamed, his voice strained from where he lay, half-conscious. "Get out!" Ember hesitated for only a second, locking eyes with Chloe, who was now weeping silently. She wanted to explain, to tell them everything. But there was no time, and they wouldn't understand. "I'm sorry," she whispered, a silent apology to her friends, to the life she was leaving behind. Silas grabbed her hand. This time his spectral fingers felt almost solid, cold but firm. He pulled her into the hidden passage, a dark, winding tunnel behind a false bookshelf. He moved with impossible speed, pulling her deeper into the heart of the manor, towards the chamber where the ritual would take place. The ritual chamber was deep beneath the manor, a circular room carved from raw earth and ancient stone. Runes glowed faintly on the floor, etched into the rock centuries ago. An ancient stone altar stood in the center. The air here was thick with concentrated magic, humming with a primal energy that made Ember's skin tingle. "The blood moon rises now," Silas stated, his voice ringing with urgency. He pulled her to the center of the circle, guiding her hands to etch the final symbols in the dust-covered stone. He stood opposite her, his form shimmering, drawing energy from the earth from the thinning veil. The words, "Little Sparrow." He urged, his eyes burning into hers. "Speak them! Speak the vow!" Ember took a deep breath, clutching the grimoire. She looked at Silas, truly looked at him, at the centuries of torment, the fierce, possessive love in his gaze. This was it. Her decision, her fate. She closed her eyes and then, with unwavering conviction, began to speak the ancient words of the binding ritual. Her voice, clear and strong, filled the chamber, weaving a spell that would bind her forever to the ghost. The ancient words flowed from Ember's lips, a melody of power and surrender. The runes on the stone floor flared to life, casting an eerie, pulsating light that danced across the rough-hewn walls. The air grew heavy, crackling with raw magic, and the scent of old roses intensified, almost suffocating in its sweetness. Silas stood before her, his spectral form radiating an intense, almost blinding light. He was drawing power from the very fabric of the manor, from the ley lines that converged beneath it, and from the thinning veil between worlds. He was changing, shifting, becoming more defined, more solid with every word she uttered. His eyes, fixed on hers, held a universe of longing, centuries of waiting culminating in this single, perilous moment. As Ember spoke the final incantation, the climax of the ritual, a profound shift occurred. A shimmering golden cord of energy erupted from her chest, flowing directly into Silas. It was not painful, but it was intensely intimate, a visceral merging of her very essence, her life force, with his. She felt a lightness, a profound sense of connection, as if a part of her was truly reaching out and intertwining with him. Simultaneously, Silas began to solidify. The ghostly translucence receded, replaced by the warm, living texture of flesh and bone. His dark hair, once ethereal, now fell soft and real against his aristocratic features. The ancient sorrow in his eyes remained, but it was now underscored by a fierce, triumphant joy. He was no longer a ghost. He was real. His transformation complete, he was a breathtaking sight. Tall, commanding, with an undeniable, archaic handsomeness that left Ember breathless. He took a step towards her, his movements no longer drifting, but solid, deliberate. The golden cord of energy that connected them pulsed, then slowly, gently, receded, its purpose served. Ember swayed, a wave of dizziness washing over her. She felt strangely hollow, yet utterly complete, a deep, pervasive bond now humming beneath her skin. She had given him her essence, and in return she felt him, a constant, resonant presence in her mind, her heart, her very soul. She saw flashes of his memories, the warmth of the sun, the scent of fresh rain, the laughter of a woman long dead, and the agonizing cold of his centuries of imprisonment. She was now part of his past, and he, inextricably, part of her future. Silas reached her, his hand, now warm and solid, reaching out to cup her face. His skin was smooth, his touch tender yet possessive. His dark eyes, no longer glowing crimson, but a deep, mesmerizing obsidian, searched hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Ember," he murmured, his voice now rich and resonant, a true physical sound that vibrated through the chamber and through her. It was the voice of a man, not a ghost, but imbued with the ancient power she knew he held. "You did it. You truly did it, my little sparrow." He leaned in, his lips, warm and soft and undeniably real, brushing against hers. It was not the cold, ethereal touch she had become accustomed to, but a kiss of living warmth, of raw, potent desire. It was the culmination of centuries of waiting, of a desperate, consuming love that had defied death and time itself. It was the ghost's kiss, a deep, soul-shattering melding of two beings. In that kiss, Ember felt not only his passion, but the profound loneliness he had endured, the fierce gratitude he felt towards her, and the terrifying, absolute possessiveness that was now a part of their shared existence. He pulled back slowly, his eyes still locked on hers. "You are bound to me now," he whispered, his thumb caressing her cheek. "Forever. You will see my world, feel my pain, know my joy. You are the heart of my rebirth." Ember, dizzy with the magic and the profound intimacy of their connection, could only nod. She was his, truly his. The skeptic had fallen, not for a logical argument, but for the dark, undeniable love of a ghost who was now very, very real. The world outside the manor, with its sirens and its investigations, seemed impossibly far away. Here in the heart of Blackwood, a new forbidden life had begun. Silas Blackwood had returned, no longer a ghost, but a man of ancient power, bound by an unbreakable vow to the woman who had dared to give him her living heart. Their story was just beginning, a tapestry woven with dark magic, possessive love, and the echoes of a forbidden kiss. The world outside the ritual chamber was a stark, brutal contrast to the ancient magic that had just transpired. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, their urgent cries tearing through the hallowed silence of Blackwood Manor's depths. The lingering scent of ozone and roses clashed with the sharp tang of wood smoke and the metallic tang of fear. Ember leaned against Silas, her body weak but her mind alight with 1,000 new sensations. She felt his strength, his overwhelming power, now anchored by her own presence within him. She saw glimpses of his memories, centuries of longing, the warmth of a forgotten sun on his skin, the sting of betrayal, the agonizing cold of his spectral prison. And beneath it all, she felt his fierce, absolute devotion, a dark, possessive current that ran through her very soul. Silas, fully corporeal, his dark eyes burning with renewed life, held her close. His touch was solid, warm, but carried the phantom chill of centuries of non-existence. "They are here," he rumbled, his voice a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through her chest, through their shared consciousness. "The accusers. The hunters." "My friends," Ember corrected, her voice weak. She remembered Chloe and Liam, their terrified faces, the betrayal she must have represented. "They'll be worried. They'll think I'm insane." A low, humorless chuckle vibrated through Silas. "They cannot comprehend what has occurred, little sparrow. They fear what they do not understand. And I am what they fear most." He gently lifted her into his arms, his strength boundless. "We must go. The manor will be crawling with them soon." He carried her effortlessly, his gait steady and powerful. As they ascended from the ritual chamber, through the hidden passages, Ember saw the aftermath of Silas's earlier fury in the library. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, unconscious agents sprawled amidst the debris. Chloe and Liam were among them, slumped against a fallen bookshelf, thankfully unharmed but deeply insensible. "They'll think you did this," Ember whispered, the weight of their judgment already pressing down on her. "They'll think I helped a monster." "Let them," Silas said, his voice hard. "Their opinions matter not. Only our bond, our shared existence matters now." He paused at a broken window in a forgotten corridor, gazing out at the approaching lights, the growing urgency of the sirens. "This manor has served its purpose. It is time we leave it behind." He did not wait for her consent. He was the force, the power, and she was the anchor, the heart that guided him. He smashed through a heavy window on the ground floor with a single powerful blow, splintering the aged wood and glass. The chill night air rushed in, carrying the scent of damp earth and the distant city lights. With Ember still cradled in his arms, Silas leaped from the window, landing silently on the overgrown lawn. He moved like a creature of the night, a shadow slipping through shadows, his steps unnaturally quiet. He ran, not towards the main road, but deeper into the surrounding woods, away from the encroaching light and the sounds of the modern world. Ember closed her eyes, burying her face in his shoulder, surrendering to the new, terrifying reality that had become her life. She was no longer Ember Miller, skeptical scholar. She was the other half of Silas Blackwood, bound forever by the ghost's kiss. The days that followed were a blur of primal instinct and profound intimacy. Silas, now flesh and blood, led them deep into the wilderness surrounding Blackwood Manor, a vast, ancient forest that stretched for miles. He moved with the effortless grace of a predator, knowing every hidden path, every shadowed cove, every source of food and water. He hunted with a chilling efficiency, providing for them both, teaching Ember how to survive in a world she had only ever observed from a distance. Ember adapted. Her scholarly mind, once focused on dusty texts, now absorbed the lessons of the wild with startling speed. She learned to identify edible plants, to track game, to move silently through the underbrush. But the most profound change was the constant, inescapable presence of Silas within her. Their souls were intertwined, a deep, resonant hum that was always there. She heard his thoughts, felt his emotions, a constant stream of ancient memories and raw, untamed instincts. She felt his hunger, his anger, his possessive love for her, and the profound joy he now felt at being corporeal again. And he, in turn, felt her. He knew her fears, her hopes, her intellect, and the deep, unwavering compassion that had drawn her to him in the first place. This merging was both beautiful and terrifying. There were moments when Ember felt utterly consumed, her identity blurring with his. She would catch herself thinking his thoughts, feeling his urges, a terrifying loss of self. Yet there were other moments when his deep, ancient love for her would wash over her, a wave of absolute belonging, and she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. "You are quiet." "Little sparrow," Silas murmured one evening as they sat by a small hidden campfire. His hand, warm and strong, rested on her knee. He now wore simple, rough-spun clothes he had scavenged, a far cry from the aristocratic garments of his portrait, but they did little to diminish his imposing presence. "It's a lot," Ember admitted, gazing into the dancing flames. "Feeling everything you feel. Remembering things that aren't mine. It's overwhelming." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a rare sight that still sent a shiver through her. "You carry centuries within you now. My pain, my rage, and my unending love. It is a burden, I know. But it is also strength. Our strength." He pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her, the sheer possessiveness of the gesture undeniable. "The world will hunt us, Ember. The descendants of my accusers will not rest until they have found me, found us. But they cannot break what we are. They cannot sever this bond." Ember leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. She knew he spoke the truth. Their bond was beyond their understanding, beyond their control. It was a merging of destinies, a new, forbidden existence born from a centuries-old curse and a Halloween dare. The skepticism she once held was long gone, replaced by a fierce, protective love for the man beside her, the ghost who was now more real than anyone she had ever known. Their fragile peace in the wilderness was shattered by the relentless pursuit of the outside world. Detective Vance and her team, now augmented with specialists, tracked them with a grim determination. The ghost of Blackwood Manor was no longer a local legend. It was a national security threat. And Ember, the missing college student, was seen as his unwilling victim, or worse, his willing accomplice. One frigid morning, as they made their way through a dense thicket, a sudden flash of light erupted from the trees. A humming silver net, crackling with anti-spectral energy, shot towards them. Silas reacted instantly, his movements blurring. He pushed Ember aside with surprising gentleness, then met the net head-on. The impact was brutal. The net wrapped around him, its energy sizzling against his newly corporeal form. He roared, a sound of ancient fury and agonizing pain, collapsing to his knees. The silver light burned him, causing faint wisps of smoke to rise from his skin. It was designed to contain spirits, and his new, merged form was vulnerable to it. "Silas!" Ember screamed, scrambling towards him. She felt his pain, a searing agony, that tore through her own consciousness, a visceral connection that brought her to her knees. Detective Vance emerged from the trees, flanked by a dozen agents, their faces grim, their weapons aimed. "Silas Blackwood," Vance's voice was sharp, triumphant. "It's over. And Ember, you're safe now. We'll get you help." Ember ignored her, crawling to Silas's side. The silver net pulsed, its energy slowly draining him, threatening to unravel the very magic that sustained his physical form. "No, you're hurting him." "He's a menace, Ember," Vance shouted. "He assaulted my team. He's a danger to society. He manipulated you. He didn't manipulate me," Ember cried, tears streaming down her face. She reached out, her hands instinctively going for the glowing strands of the net. As her fingers brushed the silver energy, a jolt, not of pain, but of powerful connection, surged through her. Through their shared consciousness, Ember saw Silas's memories of the previous ritual. She understood the intricate weaving of the spell, the flow of energy. She was not just a part of him, she was his anchor, his living conduit. And with that realization, a new power, born from their merged souls, ignited within her. Her hands glowed faintly, a warm, golden light emanating from her fingertips. She closed her eyes, focusing, willing the energy of the net to dissipate. She felt Silas's desperate will, his strength, intertwining with her own. Together, they pushed against the foreign magic. The silver net pulsed violently, then with a deafening crackle, shattered into a million sparks of light, disappearing into nothingness. Silas sagged, gasping for breath, but the agony receded. He looked at Ember, his dark eyes wide with awe and a profound understanding. You can channel it, he breathed, his voice ragged. Our combined power. Vance and her team stared, stunned. They had never seen anything like it. Ember, a seemingly ordinary young woman, had just dismantled their most powerful anti-spectral weapon with a mere touch. Ember, Vance said, her voice betraying a hint of fear. What have you done? Ember looked at Vance, then back at Silas. He was bruised, but free. And he was hers, forever intertwined. There was no going back. There was no separating them. I didn't do anything, Ember said, her voice steady, powerful, imbued with a new, quiet authority that stunned even herself. We did. Silas, with a renewed surge of strength, rose to his feet, pulling Ember with him. He stood tall, his presence commanding, no longer a ghost but a man of immense, ancient power, his hand clasped firmly around Ember's. They stood together, two halves of a singular, formidable entity facing down the world that sought to tear them apart. The confrontation had solidified their bond, transforming Ember from victim to partner, from skeptic to sorceress. They were ready. The forest was a tableau of stunned silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. Detective Vance and her team, their most potent weapon destroyed, were at a loss. They stared at Ember and Silas, no longer seeing a possessed girl and a dangerous ghost, but two beings intertwined, radiating a power that defied their understanding. This is madness, Ember, Vance finally said, her voice strained. He's bound you to him. He's stolen your life. He gave me a life, Ember countered, her voice ringing with conviction. She felt Silas's presence, strong and resolute, supporting her, empowering her. Their thoughts were a symphony, their emotions a shared landscape. I chose this. We chose this. Silas stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the agents, his dark eyes holding a silent, chilling warning. You cannot break what is unbreakable. You cannot sever what is eternal. We are bound, in life and beyond. The air around them began to shimmer, not with the aggressive energy of a confrontation, but with a softer, protective magic. The trees themselves seemed to lean in, the ancient earth beneath their feet humming with a resonant power. Ember felt it, the land, remembering its old master, recognizing his return, recognizing their return. Vance, a woman of logic and law, looked into Silas's ancient eyes, then at Ember's resolute face, and finally, she saw it. Not just magic, but a bond, a fierce, undeniable love that transcended her understanding. She had seen countless criminals, countless victims, but she had never seen anything like this. We can't fight them, one of the agents whispered, their voice filled with awe and fear. Not without that net. Vance stared, her shoulders slumping in defeat. The hunt was over. They had won. Or perhaps they had lost. Silas turned to Ember, his eyes softening, a profound tenderness replacing the steel. He lifted her hand, now imbued with a faint, ethereal glow, and pressed it to his lips. It is time, he murmured, his voice a low, intimate hum that resonated only for her, a melody in their shared consciousness. Time to truly begin. He glanced at Vance, a silent, powerful message passing between them. They were leaving, and they would not be followed. With a final, shared surge of power, the very air around them twisted, shimmered, and then, with a soft, silent pop, Ember and Silas vanished, leaving behind only the scent of old roses and the stunned, bewildered agents. They reappeared in a place Ember had only seen in Silas's memories. A vast, ancient forest clearing, bathed in the soft silver light of a full moon. Tall, ancient trees, their branches laden with centuries of wisdom, surrounded them. A waterfall tumbled into a serene pool, its water gleaming under the moonlight. This was a place of power, a place of sanctuary, a place where the magic of the old ways still thrived. Silas held her close, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her against his solid, warm body. He bent his head, his dark hair brushing her cheek, and pressed his lips to hers in a deep, soul-shattering kiss. It was the ghost's kiss, reborn. It was a kiss of freedom, of reunion, of a love that spanned centuries and defied death. Ember felt herself dissolving into him, becoming one with his powerful essence, yet paradoxically, finding herself more whole than ever before. She was no longer just Ember Miller, a scholar searching for answers. She was the other half of Silas Blackwood, the keeper of his flame, the living heart of his ancient soul. She saw the world through his eyes, felt the earth through his reborn senses, and loved him with a fierce, unwavering devotion that was now as much a part of her as her own heartbeat. They had defied fate, outsmarted ancient curses, and found a love that transcended the boundaries of life and death. Silas, the ghost, was free, and Ember, the skeptic, was forever bound, not by chains, but by a love as dark and eternal as the night itself. Their story was not an end, but a beginning, a forever after woven into the very fabric of magic, love, and the whispers of the unseen world. They were home, together, two souls irrevocably joined by the ghost's kiss.